Welcome, and welcome back, everybody, to the OK Grognard Show. It is Monday, March 8th, 2021, 10 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Today I thought I'd talk about, well, a few things, but mainly about my events at virtual Gary Con 13. Ethereal Gary Con 13, as they say. It's a virtual replacement for physical Gary Con. In the last days of COVID, I say rather hopefully. So, as COVID begins to become a non thing in the world, or at least in the United States, we still have some concerns and we still have to be vigilant, be on our guard, be careful, make sure we don't trip over our feet as we stumble toward the finish line. You got to run through first base, they tell me. You can't just run up to it because they'll get you out. So, sports metaphors aside, Gary Con 13, March 25th to 28th is a happening thing. We are going to have some fun with it. Now, what did I do? I talked about doing a bunch of different stuff, or looked at doing a bunch of different stuff. I think I've mentioned a few different things on the show as I was going along. One of the first things I looked at, and maybe some of this was the residual of having DM'd at virtual Greyhawk Con and setting up that whole kind of homage to the Giants modules, or at least to the steading of the Hill Giant Chief, and running that. Kind of a hodgepodge, or a culmination of the original and the couple of reboots, or revisions, or reawakenings of steading that they'd had over the years, sort of all scrambled, thrown into one with some touches of my own ingenuity. Um, I ran that as a sandbox last fall in 3 different virtual conventions, and then it was Greyhawk Con. I ran a slot of it there. I ran 2 slots in Autumn Revel, which is son of Gary Con. No, that doesn't work. Um, the Gary Con Fall event, Autumn Revel, which will be happening again next fall. And then I ran a couple of slots of it at Gamehole Con as well. So I set it up as sort of a sandbox and let people that wanted to play in multiple conventions and multiple slots use the same characters they had used before. It worked out. There were a couple of possibilities that somebody was in a second session and somebody was in second session. Both showed up for session 4, and how do they play the same character? Well, we work it out. But it never reared its ugly head, so I was happy that we were able to have some fun with it. I know my friend Sarah played in most of them. How many did you play in, Sarah? I see you're lurking in the chat there, and I think you played in 4 of the 5. Maybe it was only 3? No, I think it was hard to remember. It's so long ago. But it's an interesting thing. I started, all but 1. Okay, cool. I started looking at doing something similar, so I started looking at some more obscure adventure potential. And one of the things I looked at was a 1987 TSR product called Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Official Game Accessory Adventure Pack 1. It's a big pile of shortish adventures, adventures that mostly would work. They're varying lengths. We'll get into that, but most of it would be pretty good convention first edition D&D game fodder. And because it was an official advanced D&D product in '87, which was the tail end of first edition, then this became a by default a Greyhawk adventure product. Some of the things inside, including, and we'll take a quick look over on the left there. Deborah Christian is the editing, typography, keylining, cartography. Steve Sullivan, our buddy's in there, of course. Jeff Easley, cover art there. Butler, and Valerie also doing interior art. Wonderful people still around doing great things. But if you look at this, you've got different sort of headers for the types of adventures they are. There's a mystery, intrigue, deceiving appearances, help with a problem, good guys and bad guys, competition are uh, the headers for each of those. And because of that, these are not in page order, as you can see. But you wanted to put them in these without having to force them into other areas and let people know what the adventures were basically about. The initials there are the authors, and they're not listed over here, but they gave them their own section. I'm going to show you that now. Ray Wininger, who's with D&D today, used to be a freelancer. So a lot of these are freelance people that did things. Um, Janelle Jaques there had a chunk in there. Harold Johnson, all sorts of people. Look at over here on the length, long, medium, and short adventures. So medium or short, long would probably not work in a convention slot, but most of the rest would. I looked through. I read a couple of them. I looked through most of them. I think there were a couple that I kind of uh, dismissed out of hand just because from just looking at the opening, I knew it wasn't going to work for what I wanted to do in a slot at Gary Con. And mind you, I do long slots. I do 6 hours. And if there were the physical convention, I'd do a lot more players too. But this was going to be for a Sunday night thing. I wanted to wind it down, maybe just 5 players. Mid-level was one of the things I like to do because if somebody's fairly new, they can usually step up their game a little bit and play up to 5th level with a decent character sheet, things spelled out, maybe not taking a spellcaster, um, and somebody who's used to higher level stuff, they don't generally want to go to a convention and just play first level characters. Sometimes there's a compelling scenario that makes that fun, despite the fact that they might not generally seek such a game. But I like a mid-level game for conventions and in general for one-shots, game days, just getting together with friends. So, of all of these, I just determined they weren't going to do it for me for this. However, of course, some of this may make its appearance next fall when the next virtual Greyhawk Con comes up. So I'm keeping this stuff in mind for that and looking it over. I'm also looking, or was looking, at another sort of obscure product, um, the official RPGA tournament handbook. RPGA handbook. There we go. I just want to. Here we go. double check it. I think this was 87 also. Yep, 1987. Yep. So this again was at the tail end. It has two scenarios within it called Honor Guard and, well, let's check it out. Well, first, look up top there. An adventure for 6 characters, levels 4 to 8. So 5th level characters, if they're well equipped and there's 6 or more of them, or at least with experienced players, should be okay on these. Now remember, this is kind of the guidebook to running tournaments. So 87, they would have been running tournaments for about a decade, and I was in some of those early AD&D tourneys at Gen Con. So I remember vaguely, because I was pretty young, it was a long time ago, that they were certainly more and more organized as years went on, and this was written in a way to reflect some of their experience in running adventures for tournaments, for conventions. So let's pop over to the table of contents. Official RPGA Tournament Handbook. The adventures, the appendices, maps down the bottom. The cover is a trifold with maps on the interior, which can be used in part as a DM screen if you wanted to. So that's kind of neat too. But notice inside, and this is just one screenshot of one page. I'm not going to flip through the entire thing because I don't have it in PDF. But this was a scan from the table of contents just to show some of the what you'll get within. There are about a dozen pages, and if you look this up in some places, you'll find that look it up on Wikipedia, for instance, the official RPGA Tournament Handbook C6, written by a few people, Daniel Kramarski, and of course Gene and Bruce Rabe. And it was 64. It's a 64-page booklet. That outer folder I told you about, that pseudo GM screen. In the days when they did not attach the interior booklet pages to the exterior cover, so that if the maps were on there, you could hold that out separately without having to pull the staples apart, which was always a useful way of making the maps available like that. On Wikipedia, and if you look around, you'll find a review by Ken Ralston. It's in Dragon Magazine 133. He reviews in that, and I read that some time ago. He reviews a number of modules that in that period that grew out of tournament adventures that they had created. But this in particular, he reviewed as well as part of that article to talk up in particular about the first 12 pages, or the 12 pages, within that are geared toward running adventures for conventions, and in particular running tournaments for convention. It's a real guidebook. There's a lot of good information in there, and of course the 2 adventures they include in here are great examples of how to put all of that knowledge into practice. So without a doubt, you will find this. If you ever like to run games for conventions, or if you're interested in running a convention tournament and you're looking for some insights on some best practices on how to do that, without a doubt, grab yourself a copy of this, and I'll just show the cover one more time. The official RPGA Tournament Handbook. It's it's an invaluable resource for that sort of thing. I'm not saying it's the end all be all. There's certainly, since 1987, been another 34 years of conventions, not to mention technology having created a lot of fixes to things that would have been problems back in the early days of running conventions. Nevertheless, well worth getting for that sort of thing. Um, let's move on. Oh, all right. This is a Dyson Logos. Let me say that right out the gate that this is a Dyson Logos image where he puts three maps, not of his own design, but together for part of an article. And let me just switch over real quick to show. We'll get to that later. An article on Dyson's dodecahedron about the Dungeon of the Fire Opal. Three iterations of the same dungeon that were put together over time. And let me just pop back over here. Yeah, there we go. So if you recognize the dungeon map on the left, probably from the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Sample Dungeon. In that storied tome, good morning, Misty. Welcome to the chat. In that storied tome, of course, the map was presented, the premise for the potential adventure, or the location, I should say, for the dungeon, and the nearby town, somebody you can meet that can tell you about it. Abandoned monastery, ruined monastery was the scenario, and they detailed a handful of the locations, rooms that are keyed within the map itself. Then in 2001, we're looking at the center map now. In 2001, Jonathan Tweet came around, and let me try to remember. I want to say it was Jonathan Tweet writing it. Jason Vey did some illustrations, artwork for it, cartography by Todd Gamble. And I don't want to get too hard on this guy. You can tell from the upper left map where number 4 and 5 is that this door, I don't know if you can see me pointing at it up here, leads into a long hallway and then a room number 4, and then there's a hole in the floor and a tunnel over into room 5. This line between room 5 and the hallway is meant to be a thin wall. It's so thinly drawn, though, that when they redid the map for the 2001 Dragon Magazine, January 2001, I think. Dungeon Magazine, my bad. Dungeon 84, they missed that there was a wall there, sadly, and they drew it as if it was an open area. So there's really no reason for this hidden tunnel under the floor that takes you from one location to the other. It's rather pointless. On the map on the right, they brought back the location for 5th edition as the sample dungeon in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And you'll see they fixed that wall. Because, of course, when Dungeon Magazine came out, even though it not the internet that it is today, there were still plenty of people that were up in arms about, there's no wall there. Why is there a wall there? Just draw it on your own. You figured it out. Good. Add it in. Tough thing to do. Doesn't need. And some people were just being helpful. Hey, did you notice? And let me just, you missed a wall there. So, you got to get that nerdlinger working, right? And we all do it when we're the first ones and think we were the only ones who ever were revelatory regarding some little secret bit of knowledge within our Nerd Kingdom. It's a good time. In any event, so there are three iterations. A full third edition, and this is 3E, not 3.5, written up in Dungeon 84 by Jonathan Tweet, and then fifth edition update as the sample dungeon once again in the DMG in the first edition. So first, third, and fifth. And I started looking at this and I thought, well, there isn't a full first edition write up for this. And obviously, enough people know it that you might have to make some changes or surprises built in, especially with the stuff they've already familiar with. So I decided to examine all three, take them, put them back together with some changes, much like what I did with the Steading of the Hill Giant, and put it in as my Sunday evening game. So here's my schedule: three 6-hour games. Divine Right, the classic TSR 1979 hex and chit war game. Little chits, little cardboard squares with information on them regarding what different types of units there are. And classic fantasy war game. It's a great game. We've been playing it every year probably since Gary Con 3 or 4. Some of us, Steve and Kifley, and others have filtered in and out. Somebody else had originated it, and then when they couldn't, John, when he couldn't come back, he was there for 2 years? I thought maybe just the first. Um, I secured a copy from my buddy Wayne Targo, Von Deacon. You might see him running some games at Gary Con Physical. I don't know if he's getting involved in virtual Gary Con, but we figured out a way to run this on Vassal. I'll get into the details of that. Saturday night, my old slot. This year might be the year when we finally only have me having played together since the second Gary Con. We had a huge group. Tavis, creator of Adventure Conqueror King, used to run us through original Dungeons and Dragons. While he was working on Adventure Conqueror King, he kind of ported us over to that, or at least was working out some of using us as a bit of a playtest group. It was fine for us to only know original Dungeons and Dragons and still play. It's all pretty close, so there wasn't a lot of things that he needed to smooth over. And then when he couldn't come back anymore, I started running stuff on Saturday night and invited folks. Several folks joined us. We lost one last year, unfortunately. Brian and Dex and Keith were the last two that would have still been playing together with me all these years. Although Keith took a year off a few years back. He missed one. I don't know, 2019, maybe it was just Brian and Dex and some others, but not from the original group. And then Dex tells me he's not going to be doing virtual Gary Con. Keith will be back and playing, so we'll still have a sort of a institutional memory going on. But I like running that first edition game on Saturday night. I like running a 6-hour game. If it was physical, I could have a bit of a larger crowd, but I think we're keeping it down to 5 or 6. I've got 4 on the slots here because I reserve a couple of seats for individuals that are returning, so they don't have to do the mad scramble and maybe not get a seat. So 2, Sunday at 6, the Ruined Monastery. So I'm revamping that whole thing. I'm working it up for all for first edition. It'll be a good time. Those are the 3. We'll look at some of the details here. Virtual board game. It's going to be played on Vassal.com. Classic Hex and Chit war game. Divine Right. Fantasy Empires Clashing was published by TSR in 1979. Each player controls a unique realm and attempts to use diplomacy and might to ascend to rulership. You'll need the download of Vassal Virtual Tabletop, as well as the particular Vassal Divine Right module, which works with that. You just download them and open them, and they'll help set themselves up on your system. They've been doing Vassal as a virtual tabletop for war games for 15 or 20 years. It's been around a long time. The bugs are worked down on it. It's not quite as intuitive as a lot of more modern virtual tabletops, but it's very, very useful for games like Divine Right, and it works very well. We played a few times on it. We're going to do another test run. Matthew Archibald, who was with us in 2019, pressed me to play it again for virtual Gary Con after we didn't do that last year. So we've been working out the bugs. He more so than me. He's very gung-ho about it, and he knows this stuff inside and out. So I'm very glad that he's on board. So hopefully myself and Matthew, Steve and Kifley, and 2 other lucky souls will join us on Thursday at 6 p.m. Central. It says 6 hours. If we get into the 4.5, 5th, 6th hour, or getting close, whatever, and somebody's just running away with it on the victory points, and it's a foregone conclusion, we will take periodic votes and say, do we want to take one more turn? Because there's a lot that can happen on a last turn. Sudden attacks on castles, assassinations of other leaders, things like that can all get you victory points, and usually there's a lot of that happening in the last turn or two. So if we get pretty close and it looks like somebody is clobbering everybody else, we may just call it, or we may say last turn or last 2 turns. We'll go around the horn a couple times, give people a chance to make a last attempt. And, maybe we'll end it a little bit early. But we slotted it for 6 hours so we can get through as much of it as possible. It's a 20-turn, potentially a 20-turn game that never has to go that far for somebody to have won. You can come back in if you get knocked out. You keep your points. Well, I think in the rules it actually says you don't, but we say you do for a convention game. It's a little more casual, and we'll say we'll keep whatever points you built up already, and then you'll take over a currently non-allied ally, because there are over a dozen different communities on the map. You each play one, and the others can be, you can use diplomacy to bring them in as allies on your side. And you can use diplomacy to talk somebody else out of an alliance with, a non-player nation from being allied with somebody else, which can be crucial. So diplomacy works both ways. We'll be using Vassal. We'll use Discord voice chat alongside of it. On Saturday, the Dragon's Teeth game, a series of towers spanning the trackless moors, known colloquially as the Dragon's Teeth, seemed long abandoned, but recent activity on the edges of the wasteland warrants the attention of a stalwart band of adventurers before things get out of hand. 5th level pre-gens. I love 5th level for games. We played some higher level stuff before, but we're going to dial it back because that works best with this particular adventure that I'd had set up. 6 p.m., 6 hours, voice chat, Discord voice chat, roll 20 for the virtual tabletop. I ask that people have some experience in the specific rules. That is 1st edition AD&D. Same for the Ruined Monastery. The nearby wilderness is said to have underground vaults and with vast treasures long forgotten by most, but with news of this recently circulating, the time to explore and get your share is now. So it's a rush to get into the vaults and under the Ruined Monastery. Again, roll 20, Discord voice chat. My friend Dirk Collins, who runs an OD&D game for some of us, Sarah included, every other Sunday has a schedule of events too, which is worth checking out. He's running a Expanse RPG, which sadly I will not be able to be in because I'm in Divine Right on Thursday running my own game. The others might work for my schedule. I'll have to check out. He's running Gamma World, original D&D, and again original D&D on Sunday. Both of those are Friday evening and Sunday early morning are using the same setting. Although it's a big world, you won't necessarily be where our group is on Sundays, but we'll see. Classic Traveler being run Saturday morning. I usually don't do games before 10 a.m., just as a general rule. I like to wind into my day a little more slowly. I don't sleep in, really, but I don't rush out the door when I get up either, if I can help it. So, a leisurely breakfast sets the pace for the whole day. What else we got? Oh, hey, just a real quick heads up. I just got an email before the show. Lulu.com, 15% off all print products. Use code ORDER15, all capitals, one word, through March 12th. I will quickly show this and this. I did a quick search over there, Lulu.com. 611 role-playing game products. So go check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes for everybody. Oh, and by the way, I meant to get back to this. Pop over to Dyson's Dodecahedron and read that Dungeons of the Fire Opal. And again, look through all his maps too. He's got a lot of really cool stuff over there. It's well worth checking out. I myself am so impressed with everything he does. And I will also say, thanks, everybody. I think we're winding it down. Just over 30 minutes, so we might as well say thank you to everybody who jumped into the chat today to say hello. I appreciate that. Thank you, too, for following the channel on Twitch. I want to also say thank you to everybody who catches up with this on YouTube. And you can catch it. You can catch the show on Twitch live Monday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Central. That's when we do it. We always get it up onto YouTube fairly quickly, within the hour usually, on the same day that it's recorded. So it's pretty fresh, if not interactive, catching it on YouTube. And if you do that, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel as well and give us a thumbs up on videos that you like and or enjoy, or both. How about that? And, click the little bell alarm so that you get pinged when there are new episodes up. And feel free to make some comments. If you got some constructive criticism or want to just join in the conversation, please do. Always a good time. Once again, thank you to everybody who enjoys the show, and I will catch you next time. This has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.